The sharp crack of splitting wood echoed across Zane Yardley's property, just as the sun dipped below the Montana horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. But it was not him wielding the axe. He froze mid-step, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip as his eyes scanned the weathered grain shed near the eastern fence line. Someone was in there, and they had no business being on his land. Zane had lived alone on his ranch outside Ogden, Montana, since his father passed 3 years prior in 1879, leaving him the sprawling property and a profound loneliness that seemed to settle deeper into his bones with each passing season. At 26 years old, he had resigned himself to a solitary existence, focused on his cattle and horses, avoiding the pitying looks from the married folk in town who wondered why such a capable man remained unwed. The truth was simpler than they imagined. He had loved once, a girl named Sarah who died of fever before they could marry, and the pain of that loss made him wary of opening his heart again. But now someone was trespassing in his grain shed, and Zane's protective instincts flared to life. He approached cautiously, his boots making soft sounds in the dirt as he moved around the side of the structure. The door hung slightly ajar, and through the gap, he could see movement inside. His fingers wrapped around the handle of his revolver, though he did not draw it. Violence was not his first choice, but caution in 1882, Montana was simply good sense. "I know you are in there," he called out, his voice firm but not aggressive. "This is private property. Come out with your hands where I can see them." The movement inside stopped abruptly. Silence stretched for several long seconds before a voice responded, so quiet he almost missed it. "Please do not shoot. I mean no harm." It was a woman's voice, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Zane's grip on his revolver loosened immediately. He stepped closer to the door, pushing it open wider to let in the fading daylight. What he saw made him forget every word of the stern speech he had prepared. A young woman huddled in the corner of the shed, partially hidden behind several burlap sacks of grain. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her face, and her dress, once probably a respectable calico pattern, was torn and filthy. Dirt smudged her cheeks, and her eyes, a startling shade of green even in the dim light, watched him with a mixture of terror and defiance. She held a piece of wood in her hands, not as a weapon but as if she had been trying to fashion something, though what purpose it might serve he could not guess. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I did not know where else to go. I have been hiding here for 2 days. I found some grain and water, and I promise I will repay you for what I have taken." Zane raised both hands slowly, showing her he meant no harm. "Easy now. I am not going to hurt you. What is your name? What happened to you?" The woman's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back fiercely. "My name is Diana Northwood. I escaped from a wagon train 3 days ago." "Escaped?" Zane kept his voice gentle. "Were you kidnapped?" Diana shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Not kidnapped, sold. My stepfather sold me to a man named Curtis Rake, a trader heading west. He told me I was going to be Rake's wife, but I knew better. I heard them talking. Rake intended to sell me to a brothel in Oregon once we reached the territories, so I ran." Anger surged through Zane's chest, hot and fierce. The practice was not unheard of, unfortunately. Unscrupulous men sometimes traded women like livestock, and the law turned a blind eye more often than not. "How old are you?" 22. Old enough to know what fate awaited me, and desperate enough to risk everything to avoid it. Zane studied her for a long moment. She was clearly telling the truth. The fear in her eyes was genuine, and the state of her clothing and person suggested she had indeed been running and hiding for days. He made a decision that would change both their lives, though he did not know it yet. "Come into the house," he said. "You need food and a proper place to rest. We can talk more inside." Diana's eyes widened with suspicion. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." "No, I do not. But I know right from wrong, and leaving you out here is wrong. I give you my word as a gentleman that you are safe under my roof. No harm will come to you on my property." She hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she stood on shaky legs, and Zane could see how thin she had become. When she took a step forward, she stumbled, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. She flinched at his touch but did not pull away. "When did you last eat a real meal?" he asked. "5 days ago, maybe 6. I lost track." Zane cursed under his breath. "Can you walk to the house? Or do you need help?" "I can walk." Pride strengthened her voice, and Zane respected that. This woman had survived something terrible, and she was determined to maintain her dignity despite everything. He led her across the yard to his house, a solid timber structure his father had built with his own hands. Inside, the main room was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table, and a few chairs. Zane gestured for Diana to sit while he stoked the fire and put a pot of water on to boil. "I have stew from yesterday," he said. "It is not fancy, but it will fill your stomach." Diana sank into the chair with a sigh of relief. Anything would be heaven right now. As Zane heated the stew and sliced some bread, he studied her from the corner of his eye. Even in her bedraggled state, she was striking. There was something in the set of her jaw, a determination that spoke of inner strength. She had been through hell, yet she sat straight in that chair, refusing to completely surrender to her circumstances. "Where are you from originally?" he asked as he set a bowl of steaming stew and a thick slice of bread in front of her. "Ohio. A small town outside Cincinnati. My mother died when I was 16 and my father remarried a year later. My stepfather never liked me. I was a burden to him, another mouth to feed. When this rake fellow came through town looking for women willing to travel west, my stepfather saw his opportunity to be rid of me and make some money in the process." She picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took a careful bite, her eyes closed in appreciation. "This is delicious." "It is just rabbit stew. It is the best thing I have tasted in weeks." Zane sat across from her, his own meal forgotten. "This rake fellow, do you think he is looking for you?" Diana's hand paused halfway to her mouth. "I do not know. Maybe. He had 2 other women with him, so perhaps he decided I was not worth the trouble of tracking down. Or perhaps he is furious and searching everywhere. I truly do not know." "How many men were traveling with him?" 4, including Rake himself. They were all rough types. The kind of men who would not hesitate to hurt someone if it served their purposes. Zane's jaw tightened. "If they come here, they will have to go through me. But we should be smart about this. How far away was the wagon train when you escaped?" "About 15 miles east, near the river crossing. I ran at night and hid during the day. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. 15 miles in 3 days on foot with no food." Zane shook his head in amazement. "You are tougher than you look." A ghost of a smile touched Diana's lips. "My mother used to say I was stubborn as a mule. I suppose she was right." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Zane found himself watching the way the firelight played across Diana's face, softening the hard edges of fear and exhaustion. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was interesting. There was a story in her eyes, a depth of experience that drew him in despite his best efforts to maintain emotional distance. "I have a spare room," he said when she had finished eating. "It was my sister's before she married and moved to California. The bed is made up, and there is a basin and pitcher for washing. You are welcome to stay there as long as you need." Diana's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not fight them. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not owe me anything. Zane considered the question carefully. I have been alone for a long time. I know what it feels like to need help and have nowhere to turn. Besides, my mother raised me to be a decent man. I cannot turn away someone in need, especially not a woman running for her life. Thank you, Diana whispered. I will find a way to repay you. We can worry about that later. For now, you need rest. He showed her to the small bedroom at the back of the house. It was modest but clean, with a simple bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a wooden dresser, and a small window that looked out over the pasture. Diana stood in the doorway, taking it all in as if she could not quite believe her good fortune. I will leave you to get settled, Zane said. If you need anything, just call out. I will be in the main room. Diana turned to him, and in the lamplight he could see the full extent of her exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin had a grayish tinge that spoke of prolonged stress and hunger. Mr. Yardley, Zane, please. Zane, she corrected. I want you to know that I will not be a burden. As soon as I am rested, I will help however I can. I can cook and clean, tend animals, mend clothes. I am not afraid of hard work. I believe you, but tonight just rest. We can figure out the details tomorrow. She nodded, and Zane closed the door, giving her privacy. He returned to the main room and sank into his chair by the fire, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? Harboring a runaway woman could bring trouble, especially if this rake character came looking for her. But Zane could not bring himself to regret his decision. Something about Diana called to him, awakened something he thought had died with Sarah. He sat there for a long time, staring into the flames and thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. Just this morning, he had been contemplating another solitary winter, another year of empty rooms and silent meals. Now, there was a woman sleeping in his sister's old room, a woman with a story that had already begun to chip away at the walls around his heart. The next morning, Zane woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He sat up in his bed, momentarily disoriented before remembering Diana. He dressed quickly and emerged from his room to find her standing at his stove, expertly managing a skillet while a pot of coffee percolated nearby. She had washed her face and attempted to tame her hair, pulling it back into a loose braid. In the morning light streaming through the windows, she looked younger and more vulnerable, but also determined. "Good morning," she said when she noticed him. "I hope you do not mind. I found the bacon in your cold box and the eggs in the basket by the door. I wanted to make myself useful." "You should be resting." "I rested all night. It was the best sleep I have had in months, maybe years. Now I want to earn my keep." Zane could not help but smile. "You are as stubborn as a mule, just like you said." Diana returned his smile, and he felt something shift in his chest. "My mother knew me well." They sat down to breakfast together, and Zane was impressed by her cooking. The eggs were perfectly done, the bacon crisp, and the coffee strong and hot. As they ate, Diana asked him about the ranch, his cattle, and his life. He found himself talking more than he had in years, telling her about growing up on this land, about his father's death, and his sister's decision to move west with her husband. "You miss her?" Diana asked. "Every day, but she is happy, and that is what matters. She writes when she can, tells me about her life in Sacramento. She has 2 children now, a boy and a girl. It must be hard being here alone." Zane shrugged. "You get used to it, or at least I thought I did." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. They were both lonely souls who had found unexpected companionship in each other. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Diana threw herself into helping around the ranch with an energy that amazed Zane. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized his pantry, mended his clothes, and even helped him tend the animals. She had a natural way with the horses, speaking to them softly and moving around them with confidence. "Where did you learn to handle horses?" Zane asked one afternoon as they groomed his mare together. "My grandfather had a farm. I spent every summer there until he died when I was 14. He taught me everything about animals, said I had a gift for it. He was right." Diana's cheeks colored at the compliment. "Thank you." As the days turned into weeks, Zane found himself looking forward to each morning, to the sight of Diana moving around his kitchen, to the sound of her laughter when he told a joke, to the conversations they shared by the fire in the evenings. She told him more about her life, about her mother's death and her difficult relationship with her stepfather, about her dreams of finding a place where she belonged. "I always imagined traveling west," she said one evening as they sat together watching the sunset from the porch. "But not like this. Not running for my life. I wanted to choose my own path, make my own decisions." "You did choose," Zane pointed out. "You chose to run rather than accept the fate your stepfather and Rake had planned for you. That took courage." Diana turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "I was terrified. I still am sometimes. I wake up in the night thinking I hear them coming for me." Without thinking, Zane reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond helping her with practical tasks, and the contact sent a jolt through him. "You are safe here. I promise you that." Diana's fingers curled around his, holding tight. "I believe you." That night marked a turning point in their relationship. The careful distance they had maintained began to dissolve, replaced by a growing awareness of each other. Zane found himself noticing small details about Diana. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the soft sound of her humming while she worked, the grace of her movements when she thought no one was watching. And Diana, for her part, began to see Zane not just as her savior, but as a man worth knowing. She admired his quiet strength, his kindness to his animals, the way he treated her with respect and dignity. He was nothing like the men she had known before. Not cruel like her stepfather, not predatory like Rake, but genuinely good in a way she had almost stopped believing existed. One morning, about a month after Diana's arrival, Zane was out mending a fence when he saw riders approaching from the east. His heart immediately jumped into his throat. 3 men on horseback, moving purposefully toward his property. He dropped his tools and strode quickly back to the house. "Diana," he called as he entered, "we have visitors. Go to my room and stay there until I tell you it is safe." Her face went pale. "Is it them? I do not know yet, but we are not taking chances. Go, now." She hurried to his bedroom without argument, and Zane checked his revolver before stepping back outside. The riders were closer now, and he could make out their features. Rough-looking men, exactly as Diana had described. His hand rested casually on his gun as they approached. The lead rider, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, reined in his horse a few yards from Zane. "Morning. We are looking for someone." A young woman, dark hair, green eyes, goes by the name Diana. "You seen anyone matching that description?" Zane kept his expression neutral. "Cannot say that I have." "Why are you looking for her?" She ran away from her intended husband. "Man named Curtis Rake. He is mighty anxious to get her back." "If she ran away, seems like maybe she did not want to marry him." The scarred man's eyes hardened. "That is not your concern. Have you seen her or not?" "Like I said, no. Now you are on my property uninvited. I suggest you move along." One of the other men spoke up. "We heard you live alone out here. Seems odd you would not notice a woman passing through." "I said I have not seen her." "Are you calling me a liar?" The tension in the air thickened. The three men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Zane's hand remained steady on his gun, and his eyes never wavered from the lead rider. Finally, the scarred man nodded slowly. "All right. But if you do see her, there is a reward for information. $20. I will keep that in mind." The men turned their horses and rode away, but Zane did not relax until they disappeared from sight. He went back inside and found Diana standing in the doorway of his bedroom, her face white as a sheet. "They are gone," he said. "For now." Diana's legs seemed to give out and she sank onto the edge of his bed. "They are still looking for me, after all this time." Zane sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. That rake must be a persistent man or a prideful one, probably both. "What am I going to do?" "I cannot stay here forever. I am putting you in danger." "You are not going anywhere," Zane said firmly. "This is your home now if you want it to be." Diana looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Why would you risk so much for me?" The words came out before Zane could stop them. "Because I care about you, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time." The confession hung in the air between them. Diana's breath caught, and then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "I care about you too. You have shown me more kindness in a month than I received in years from my own family. You have made me feel safe, valued. You have given me hope." Zane lifted his free hand and gently wiped away her tears. "You deserve all of that and more." Their faces were close now, close enough that Zane could see the flecks of gold in Diana's green eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath. The moment stretched, charged with possibility, and then Diana closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But when Zane responded, pulling her closer and deepening the kiss, it transformed into something more. All the loneliness, all the longing they had both carried for so long poured into that kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Diana whispered. "So have I," Zane admitted, "but I did not want to take advantage of your situation." Diana cupped his face in her hands. "You could never do that. You are a good man, Zane Yardley, the best man I have ever known." They kissed again, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. This was a declaration, a promise of something neither had dared to hope for. When they finally separated, Zane rested his forehead against Diana's. "Those men might come back. We need to be prepared." "I know. But right now, in this moment, I just want to be happy." "Is that all right?" Zane smiled and kissed her once more. "That is more than all right." The next few days were a strange mixture of happiness and tension. Zane and Diana navigated their new relationship with a sweetness that surprised them both, stealing kisses when they thought the other was not looking, holding hands by the fire in the evenings, sharing hopes and dreams they had long kept buried. But underneath it all was the constant awareness that danger might return at any moment. Zane taught Diana to shoot, reasoning that she should be able to defend herself if necessary. She proved to be a quick learner, her natural steadiness serving her well. They set up targets behind the barn, and Diana practiced until she could consistently hit what she aimed at. "You are a natural," Zane said after she hit 3 targets in a row. "I am motivated," Diana replied. "I will not be helpless if they come back." One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars come out, Diana leaned her head on Zane's shoulder. "Tell me about Sarah." Zane stiffened slightly. He had mentioned Sarah once, weeks ago, but they had not discussed her since. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. I want to understand what shaped you into the man you are." So Zane told her. He spoke of meeting Sarah at a church social, of their courtship, of the plans they had made for a future together. He described her laughter, her kindness, and the devastating speed with which the fever had taken her. "I thought my heart died with her," he admitted. "I thought I would never feel that way about anyone again. I did not want to because the pain of losing her was almost more than I could bear." Diana lifted her head to look at him. "And now?" "Now I realized that closing myself off was not honoring her memory. It was just hiding from life. Sarah would have wanted me to be happy, to love again. And you," he brushed a strand of hair from Diana's face, "you have awakened something in me I thought was gone forever." "I am glad," Diana whispered, "because you have done the same for me. Before I met you, I did not believe good men existed. I thought the world was full of people like my stepfather and Rake, people who only took and never gave. You showed me I was wrong." They kissed under the stars, and Zane felt the last of his walls crumble. He was in love with Diana Northwood, completely and irrevocably in love. The realization should have terrified him, but instead, it filled him with a warmth that spread through his entire being. "Marry me," he said when they pulled apart. Diana's eyes widened. "What? Marry me? I know it is fast, and I know the circumstances are unusual, but I love you, Diana. I want you to stay here not as a guest or even as a friend, but as my wife. What do you say?" Diana's face cycled through a dozen emotions: surprise, joy, fear, hope. "Are you certain? You barely know me." "I know everything that matters. I know you are brave and strong. I know you are kind and hardworking. I know that being with you makes me happier than I have been in years." "That is enough for me." "Yes," Diana breathed. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Zane. I think I started falling in love with you that first night when you showed me kindness instead of suspicion." They held each other close, both marveling at how quickly their lives had changed. A month ago they were strangers. Now they were planning a future together. "We should go to town tomorrow," Zane said. "Talk to the preacher. The sooner we make this official, the better. If Rake's men come back, you will be my wife, and that gives us legal protection." Diana nodded. "That makes sense. But Zane, I want you to know that I am not marrying you just for protection. I am marrying you because I love you and cannot imagine my life without you. I know, and I love you for the same reason." They went to Ogden the next morning, riding together on Zane's wagon. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. Zane took Diana straight to the church, where they found Reverend Miller preparing for Sunday services. The Reverend was a kind-faced man in his 50s who had known Zane since he was a boy. His eyebrows rose in surprise when Zane introduced Diana as his intended. "This is quite sudden," the Reverend said. "I had heard you were content with your solitary life." "Things change," Zane replied. "I found someone who makes me want to live again, not just exist. Can you marry us?" Reverend Miller looked between them, and whatever he saw in their faces seemed to satisfy him. "I can, but I would like to speak with Miss Northwood privately first, if you do not mind, Zane. It is my practice when performing marriages." Zane nodded and stepped outside, giving them privacy. Inside, the Reverend gestured for Diana to sit. "I need to know that you are entering this marriage of your own free will," he said gently. "Zane is a good man, but if there is any coercion or pressure, you must tell me." Diana met his eyes steadily. "There is no coercion. I love Zane and I want to be his wife. He saved my life and showed me what real goodness looks like. Marrying him is the easiest decision I have ever made." The Reverend studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "Very well. I believe you. Let us bring Zane back in and discuss the details." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church. Zane's closest neighbor, an older rancher named Tom Sterling, served as a witness along with his wife Martha. Diana wore a simple blue dress that Martha had helped her alter to fit properly, and she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that Zane had picked that morning. As they stood before Reverend Miller and recited their vows, Zane felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was meant to be. Diana was meant to be his wife, and he was meant to be her husband. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife and Zane kissed his bride, he knew he was the luckiest man alive. The Sterlings invited them to a small celebratory meal at their home, and Diana charmed them both with her warmth and intelligence. Martha pulled Zane aside at one point and whispered, "She is perfect for you. Do not let her go." "I have no intention of it," Zane replied. They returned home as the sun was setting, and Zane carried Diana over the threshold, both of them laughing at the old tradition. Inside, Diana looked around the house with new eyes. "This is my home now," she said wonderingly. "Truly my home." "Our home," Zane corrected. "Everything I have is yours." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two lonely souls finding solace and joy in each other. Zane was gentle with Diana, aware that her past experiences with men had been largely negative. But Diana met him with equal parts passion and trust, and together they discovered a connection that went beyond the physical. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in Zane's bed, Diana traced patterns on his chest with her finger. "I never thought I could be this happy. I was so lost, so afraid. And then you found me." "We found each other," Zane said. "I was lost too, in a different way. You brought light back into my life." The weeks following their marriage were blissful. They settled into their life together with an ease that felt natural, as if they had been together for years instead of months. Diana continued to amaze Zane with her capabilities. She was not only an excellent cook and housekeeper, but also proved invaluable in managing the ranch. She had a keen mind for numbers and helped him organize his accounts, pointing out areas where he could save money or increase profits. "Where did you learn bookkeeping?" he asked one evening as she pored over his ledgers. "My mother taught me." She ran her own business before she married my father, a small seamstress shop. She said a woman should always know how to manage money so she would never be dependent on anyone. She was a wise woman. She was. I wish you could have met her. Winter was approaching, and Zane spent his days preparing the ranch for the cold months ahead. Diana worked alongside him, helping to reinforce the barn, stock the pantry, and ensure the animals had adequate shelter. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, Diana often reading aloud while Zane worked on repairing tack or other equipment. It was during one of these peaceful evenings that trouble returned. The knock on the door was loud and aggressive. Zane immediately stood, his hand going to his gun. He motioned for Diana to move into the bedroom, but she shook her head. "I am your wife now. We face this together." Zane did not have time to argue. He opened the door to find Curtis Rake himself standing on his porch, flanked by two armed men. Rake was a tall, thin man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. "Yardley," Rake said without preamble, "I know she is here. My men saw you in town with her. That is my property you married, and I want her back." Zane's jaw tightened. "Diana is not property. She is my wife, legally married before God and witnesses. You have no claim on her." Rake's eyes narrowed. "Her stepfather sold her to me. I paid good money. A piece of paper from some country preacher does not change that. The law says otherwise. Diana is an adult woman who chose to marry me. Any agreement you had with her stepfather is invalid. Now get off my property." One of Rake's men stepped forward, hand on his gun. "We are not leaving without her." Diana emerged from behind Zane, her chin raised defiantly. "I am not going anywhere with you. I would rather die than be sold like cattle." Rake's face twisted with rage. "You little choose your next words very carefully," Zane interrupted, his voice deadly calm. "You are threatening my wife on my property. I have every legal right to defend her, and I will not hesitate to do so." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Zane could see Rake calculating his options, weighing the risks. Finally, the man stepped back. "This is not over," he said. "I will go to the law. I have a contract." "You do that," Zane replied. "In the meantime, if you set foot on my land again, I will shoot you for trespassing." "That is not a threat. It is a promise." Rake glared at them both before turning and stalking back to his horse. His men followed, but one of them looked back with an expression that promised future trouble. Zane closed and locked the door, then pulled Diana into his arms. She was shaking, but whether from fear or anger he could not tell. "He will not take you," Zane said fiercely. "I will protect you no matter what. What if he does go to the law? What if they try to enforce his contract? Then we will fight it. You are my wife. We have witnesses, legal documentation. Any contract he has is void because it involved selling a person, which is illegal." Diana pulled back to look at him. "You are risking so much for me. You are worth every risk." True to his word, Rake went to the local sheriff, a man named Bill Dawson who Zane had known for years. The sheriff rode out to the ranch 2 days later, his expression apologetic. "Zane, I am sorry about this, but I have to ask. Did you know this woman was promised to another man when you married her?" "She was not promised, Sheriff. She was sold against her will. There is a difference." Dawson nodded slowly. "Rake has a document signed by her stepfather, transferring guardianship. But as I told him, she is over 18 and married. The document is worthless." Relief flooded through Zane. "So we have nothing to worry about, legally, no. But Rake is not the type to let things go. He is angry, and angry men do stupid things. Watch your back." After the sheriff left, Zane and Diana discussed their options. They could live in fear, waiting for Rake to make another move, or they could take action. "I think we should gather evidence against him," Diana said. "You said he had other women with him when I escaped. If we can prove he is trafficking women, the law will have to act." Zane considered this. "It is risky. We would need to find those women and get them to testify. I know where he camps when he is in the area, near the river crossing about 15 miles east. If we go there, we might be able to find out where he took them." It took several days of careful planning, but eventually, Zane and Diana rode out to the location she had described. They approached cautiously, leaving their horses hidden in a grove of trees and creeping forward on foot. The camp was there, but it was nearly empty. Only one man remained, a younger fellow who looked more scared than dangerous. Zane and Diana watched from hiding as the man paced nervously, clearly waiting for someone. "We could talk to him," Diana whispered. "He looks like he might be persuaded to cooperate." Zane was not sure, but before he could object, Diana stood and walked into the camp. The young man spun around, eyes wide. "Do not be afraid," Diana said, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. "I just want to talk." "You are the one who ran away," the man said. "Rake is furious, I know, but I am not here to cause you trouble. I want to know about the other women. What happened to them?" The man's face crumpled. "He sold them. In Virginia City. I did not want any part of it, but Rake said I owed him money and had to work it off. I am not like him. I swear I am not." Zane stepped out of hiding, and the young man's hand went to his gun, but Zane was faster. "Easy. We are not here to hurt you. We just want the truth." Over the next hour, they learned everything. The young man, whose name was Peter, had fallen into debt gambling, and Rake had offered him a way to earn money quickly. But once Peter realized what Rake was actually doing, he wanted out. Rake threatened to kill him if he left. "Help us bring him to justice," Zane said. "Testify against him, and we will make sure you are protected." Peter hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I will do it, Those women deserved better. They took Peter to Sheriff Dawson, who listened to his story with growing anger. With Peter's testimony and Diana's account, they had enough to issue a warrant for Rake's arrest on charges of human trafficking. The sheriff assembled a small posse, and they tracked Rake to a saloon in a nearby town. The arrest was swift, though Rake fought and threatened every step of the way. His trial was held 3 weeks later, and with Peter and Diana both testifying, he was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. When it was over, Diana stood on the courthouse steps and breathed deeply. It is truly over. He cannot hurt anyone else now. Zane wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You were incredibly brave. You gave those other women justice. We did it together, like everything else. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm after that. Winter came and went, and with the spring thaw came new opportunities. Diana suggested they expand the ranch, perhaps adding sheep to their cattle operation. Zane agreed, and they traveled to neighboring ranches to purchase breeding stock. As they worked side by side, their love deepened and matured. They learned each other's rhythms, their strengths and weaknesses. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always worked through it with respect and communication. One morning in early summer, Diana woke feeling ill. Zane hovered anxiously as she was sick into the basin, and when she looked up at him with wide eyes, he knew. I think I might be with child, she said. Joy exploded in Zane's chest. Truly, I am not certain yet, but the signs are there. They rode to town the next day to see the doctor, who confirmed Diana's suspicion. She was indeed pregnant, about 6 weeks along if his estimation was correct. A baby, Zane kept saying on the ride home, his voice full of wonder. We are going to have a baby. Diana laughed at his amazement. That is generally what happens when two people love each other as we do. I know, but still. A baby, our baby. Diana's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She remained active around the ranch, though Zane fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to rest more. She tolerated his concern with good humor, knowing it came from a place of love. They spent the long summer evenings planning for their child, discussing names and preparing the spare bedroom as a nursery. Zane built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, spending hours sanding and finishing it until it was perfect. Our child will be so loved, Diana said one night as they sat together, her hand resting on her growing belly. Of course they will. They will have parents who chose each other, who fought for each other. That is the best foundation we could give them. Diana went into labor on a cold January morning in 1883. Martha Sterling came to assist, having delivered many babies over her years on the frontier. Zane paced anxiously in the main room as Diana's cries echoed from the bedroom. First babies take time, Martha told him. Go tend your animals. I will call you when the time is right. But Zane could not leave. He stayed close, ready to help if needed. Finally, after hours of labor, he heard the most beautiful sound in the world, his child's first cry. Martha opened the door, her face beaming. You have a son, a healthy, strong boy. Come meet him. Zane entered the bedroom to find Diana propped against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. Zane, meet your son. Zane approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Diana pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes squinted shut, mouth open in another wail. He was perfect. Can I hold him? Zane whispered. Diana carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Zane looked down at his son with wonder. This tiny person was half him, half Diana. A product of their love and their commitment to each other. What should we name him? Diana asked. They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, holding his son, Zane knew exactly what felt right. Matthew, he said. After my father, Matthew Yardley. Diana smiled. Matthew, I love it. Welcome to the world, Matthew. The baby quieted at the sound of his mother's voice, and Zane carefully returned him to Diana's arms. He sat on the edge of the bed, and together they marveled at the miracle they had created. The years that followed were full and rich. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything on it. Diana proved to be a loving, patient mother who balanced discipline with affection. Zane watched his son grow with pride and joy, teaching him to ride, to care for the animals, to understand the land. When Matthew was 3, Diana became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Diana's mother. Rose had Diana's green eyes and Zane's dark hair, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. But Zane and Diana faced every challenge together, their partnership strengthening with each passing year. They expanded the ranch steadily, adding more land when they could afford it, improving their herd through careful breeding. Diana's head for business proved invaluable, and under her management they prospered. As their children grew, Zane and Diana made sure to tell them their story. Not the harsh details, but the important parts. How their mother had been brave enough to run from a terrible situation, how their father had chosen kindness over suspicion, how love had found them when they both needed it most. So you found Mama hiding in the grain shed? Matthew asked one night when he was about 10 years old. I did, and she changed my life forever. For the better? Rose asked. Absolutely for the better, Zane confirmed, pulling Diana close. Your mother took my lonely life and filled it with love and purpose. She gave me all of you, and that is the greatest gift I have ever received. Diana kissed his cheek. You saved me, Zane. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other. The years continued to pass. Matthew grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. He took over more and more of the daily operations, showing a natural talent for ranching. Rose inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, and she announced at 16 that she wanted to become a teacher. A teacher, Zane said, surprised but pleased. Like Grandma Rose with her business, I want to do something important, Rose explained. And teaching is important. There are so many children out here who need education. Diana supported her daughter's dream wholeheartedly, and when Rose turned 18, they sent her to a teaching college in Helena. It was hard to watch her go, but they were immensely proud. Matthew married at 24, a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the eastern section of Zane and Diana's property and started their own family. The ranch truly became a family operation, with 3 generations working together. As Zane and Diana entered their later years, they often sat on the porch together, watching the sunset just as they had when they first fell in love. Their hair was grayer now, their movements slower, but their love had only deepened with time. Do you ever think about that night I found you in the grain shed? Zane asked one evening. Diana smiled. All the time. I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that I would die out there alone. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I had said. I think about it too, about how close I came to turning you away, to choosing safety over compassion. Thank God I made the right choice. It was the right choice for both of us. You gave me a home, a family, a life I had never dared to dream of, and in return I got to love you. I got to build something real and lasting with you. Zane took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the wedding band she had worn for over 30 years. You made me forget my loneliness, Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You reminded me what it meant to truly live." "We were both lost," Diana said softly. "And we found each other in the darkness. That is the real miracle of our story." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In the distance, they could see Matthew working with the horses, his own children playing nearby. Rose had returned from Helena and was teaching at the school in Ogden, visiting every Sunday for family dinner. "We built a good life," Zane said. "We built a wonderful life," Diana corrected. "Full of love and family and purpose. Everything we both needed." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zane pulled Diana closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder just as she had done countless times before. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and built a legacy. They had loved each other through all of it, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. The grain shed where Zane had first found Diana still stood on the property, a silent witness to the moment that changed everything. Sometimes, when Zane passed it during his daily rounds, he would pause and remember. The frightened woman hiding in the shadows, the decision to help rather than turn away. The beginning of the greatest love story he had ever known. Matthew eventually took over the ranch completely, allowing Zane and Diana to truly retire. They remained in the main house, but their days were filled with leisure rather than labor. They read books together, took long walks around the property, and spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly. Rose married a kind man named Daniel, a lawyer from Helena, and they settled in Ogden. She continued teaching, becoming one of the most respected educators in the region. She often brought her students to the ranch for field trips, teaching them about agriculture and animal husbandry. Zane loved those days, watching his daughter share her knowledge with young minds. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Matthew and Rose threw a large celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from miles around to honor the couple who had built such a remarkable life together. As Zane and Diana danced together under the stars, surrounded by their loved ones, they reflected on all they had overcome. 40 years, Diana marveled. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." 40 years of waking up beside you, Zane said, "and it still is not enough." "I will never have enough time with you." Diana's eyes filled with happy tears. "I love you, Zane Yardley, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow." "And I love you, Diana Yardley. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They continued to dance, oblivious to the crowd watching them with admiration and affection. Their love had become legendary in the community, a shining example of what true partnership could achieve. As the years continued their steady march, Zane and Diana remained devoted to each other. When Diana's health began to fail in her late 60s, Zane became her primary caretaker, tending to her with the same gentle dedication he had shown when they first met. He read to her, brought her tea, and sat beside her bed for hours, just holding her hand. "You do not have to stay with me all day," Diana said one afternoon. "You should be outside enjoying the fresh air." "There is nowhere I would rather be than right here with you," Zane replied firmly. "We have been together for nearly 50 years. I am not going to start leaving you alone now." Diana smiled, her eyes still bright despite her weakened body. 50 years. We have been blessed, have we not? More than blessed. We have been fortunate beyond measure. Diana recovered from that particular illness, but they both knew their time was growing shorter. They made the most of every day, cherishing the simple moments. Morning coffee together, evening sunsets, visits from their children and grandchildren. On a beautiful spring morning, when Diana was 72 and Zane was 76, They sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was alive with activity. Matthew's children, now grown, worked the land with the same dedication their grandfather had shown. Rose's daughter, pursuing her own teaching career, had brought a group of students to visit. "Look at all of this," Diana said, gesturing to the bustling scene before them. "All of this came from that night in the grain shed, from your kindness and my desperation, from our love." Zane squeezed her hand. "We planted good seeds and they have grown into something beautiful." "I have no regrets," Diana said softly. "Not one. Every moment with you has been a gift. Nor do I. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You took my lonely existence and transformed it into a life worth living." They sat in peaceful contentment, watching their legacy unfold before them. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, passed down through generations. But more than the land and the livestock, they had passed down something more valuable. The knowledge that love could heal, that kindness mattered, that two broken souls could come together and create something whole and beautiful. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Zane and Diana remained on the porch, hand in hand. Their journey together had been long and rich, full of challenges overcome and joys celebrated. From the terrified woman hiding in a grain shed to the matriarch of a thriving family, Diana had traveled far. And Zane, who had thought himself destined for lifelong loneliness, had discovered that love could find you in the most unexpected places. Their story was one of courage and compassion, of two people who chose each other against the odds and built a life that mattered. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. Years later, when both Zane and Diana had passed, their great-grandchildren would still gather on that same porch and listen to the story of how their great-grandmother was found hiding in the grain shed, and how their great-grandfather's choice to help her had changed the course of their family forever. The grain shed itself became a family landmark, carefully maintained by each generation. Inside, someone had carved into one of the wooden beams, "Here began the greatest love story ever told." And indeed, it was true. From desperation and loneliness had sprung hope and love, growing and flourishing over the decades into something that would endure long after both of them were gone. Matthew and Rose made sure their parents' story was never forgotten. They told their children, who told their children, ensuring that the legacy of Zane and Diana Yardley would live on. It became a family tradition to visit the grain shed on wedding anniversaries, to remember where it all began, to honor the love that had created such a beautiful legacy. The ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's stewardship, and later under his children's management. The land that Zane had inherited and expanded became one of the most successful operations in Montana, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. But more than its commercial success, the Yardley Ranch was known for being a place of love and family, where everyone was welcomed and treated with respect. Rose's influence spread through her teaching, touching hundreds of young lives. She often told her students about courage, using her mother's story as an example. A young woman who refused to accept the fate others had chosen for her, who risked everything for freedom, who found love in the darkest moment. It inspired many of her students to stand up for themselves, to choose their own paths, to believe that their circumstances did not define their futures. The love story of Zane and Diana became woven into the fabric of Ogden itself. Old-timers would tell newcomers about the cowboy who found a woman hiding in his grain shed, and how their unlikely meeting had produced one of the strongest marriages anyone had ever witnessed. Young couples would ask for advice, hoping to build something as lasting as what Zane and Diana had shared. And through it all, the essence of their story remained constant. Two lonely souls who found each other, who chose love over fear, who built something beautiful from broken pieces. Zane had been living a half-life, going through the motions without real purpose or joy. Diana had been running from horror, convinced that goodness no longer existed in the world. Together, they discovered that love could heal, that trust could be rebuilt, that two people committed to each other could overcome any obstacle. Their marriage had been tested many times over the decades. Financial hardships, health scares, the normal struggles of raising children and managing a large operation. But through everything, they had held fast to each other, their commitment never wavering. They had promised before God and witnesses to love each other in good times and bad, and they had honored that promise every single day. The photograph taken on their 50th wedding anniversary hung in the main house, a cherished family treasure. In it, Zane and Diana sat side by side, their hands clasped together, their faces lined with age but glowing with happiness. Anyone who looked at that photograph could see the love radiating between them, as strong at 50 years as it had been at the beginning. When Diana passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, Zane was beside her, holding her hand as he had done for so many years. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her kindness, her strength, her unwavering goodness. Zane stood at the graveside, supported by his children and grandchildren, and said his final goodbye to the woman who had been his everything. "Thank you," he whispered as they lowered her casket into the ground. "Thank you for hiding in my grain shed. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for every moment we shared." Zane lived for another 3 years after Diana's death, cared for by his devoted family. He spent his final years surrounded by the legacy they had built together, taking comfort in knowing that their love story would continue through the generations. He visited Diana's grave every day, telling her about their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, keeping her updated on the ranch, sharing his thoughts and feelings as he always had. When Zane passed away at 81, he was buried beside Diana, their headstones side by side just as they had been in life. The inscription on Zane's stone read, "Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he chose kindness and found love." Diana's read, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she chose courage and found home." Between the two headstones, their children had placed a small marker that simply said, "Together forever, a love story for the ages," and it truly was. Long after both of them were gone, the story of the cowboy who found a woman hiding in his grain shed continued to inspire. It reminded people that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that kindness could change lives, that choosing to help someone in need could lead to unimaginable blessings. The grain shed still stood on the property, maintained by the family as a memorial to where it all began. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs documenting the Yardley family through the generations, all stemming from that one fateful night when Zane heard a noise in his grain shed and chose to investigate with compassion rather than anger. Visitors to the ranch, whether family or friends, always made a pilgrimage to the grain shed. It had become a place of reflection, a reminder of the power of human connection, of the importance of choosing love over fear. Young couples starting their lives together would stand inside and imagine Diana huddled in the corner, terrified and desperate, and Zane extending his hand in friendship and safety. The ranch itself became a symbol of what could be built when love was the foundation. Every building, every fence, Every animal represented the partnership between Zane and Diana, the life they had created together through hard work, mutual respect, and unwavering commitment. Their descendants took pride in maintaining not just the physical property, but the values Zane and Diana had instilled: kindness, integrity, family, and love above all else. Matthew often told his own grandchildren that the secret to his parents' successful marriage was simple. They had seen each other truly from the very beginning. Zane had seen Diana not as a problem to be solved or a burden to be borne, but as a person worthy of help and respect. Diana had seen Zane not as a means to an end, but as a genuinely good man deserving of love and partnership. That foundation of mutual respect and recognition had sustained them through 54 years of marriage. Rose, in her teaching and in her own marriage, emphasized the courage aspect of the story. Her mother had been brave enough to run, to risk death, rather than accept slavery. Her father had been brave enough to open his heart again after loss. Both had been brave enough to choose each other, despite the uncertain circumstances. That courage, Rose taught, was what made great love stories possible. The family gathered every year on the anniversary of Zane and Diana's wedding, turning it into a celebration of love and family. They would share a meal, tell stories, and always end the evening at the grain shed, raising a toast to the couple whose love had started it all. It was a tradition that bound the generations together, a reminder of their roots and their values. As decades passed, and the Wild West became history, the story of Zane and Diana took on an almost mythical quality. But those who knew the real people understood that the truth was even better than any myth. They had been real people with real struggles who chose love and built something lasting. Their story was not about perfection, but about persistence. Not about ease, but about commitment. Not about fairy tale romance, but about the deep, abiding love that grows when two people truly see each other and choose each other every single day. The land that Zane had worked and Diana had helped manage continued to flourish, passing through the generations as a living testament to their love. Every sunrise over the Montana mountains, every successful harvest, every new foal or calf born on the property was part of their continuing legacy. The ranch was more than just a business or a piece of property. It was a love story written in soil and wood, in flesh and blood, in the lives of every person who called it home.